In this lesson, we'll go through the most common operations you would use in the template: attribute binding, conditional rendering, list rendering, and list rendering with conditional. But first, we have to set up some basic layout for the page. The class names are used for connecting the CSS and main.css. Now the page looks like this. We want to put an image in this container, and it will appear in here. We have some images that we prepared back in lesson 2. We're going to import and use one of them. We're importing the image directly from the image path. This importing syntax is supported out of the box. Let's create an image element here. We want to use the imported image here. So we have to use vbind. You can think of the vbind directive as a special syntax for creating a bond between the src attribute and the JavaScript variable. Everything between the quotation marks will be treated as a JavaScript expression. Having JavaScript code embedded in an attribute is a common theme in Vue.js. Aside from src, this vbind directive can be applied on other attributes, such as class and style. We'll see how that works in a future lesson. Now in the browser, you should see the image. We've used the double curly braces in the previous lesson. Vbind is like the double curly braces, but for binding attributes. But since this variable is not reactive, it's never going to change, so this binding is not very interesting. We can make the image reactive by creating a ref. We're passing the SockScreenImage variable through the ref to create a new state. Now if we change the value of the image ref to another image path, the image element will be updated accordingly. Alternatively, vbind can also be written with just the colon as a shorthand syntax. Now let's talk about using conditional logic in the template. We want to conditionally render in stock and out of stock. Let's create a new ref called in stock with a boolean value. To conditionally render these two elements, we can use vif and velse. Vif and velse have to be used on elements right next to each other. Just like with vbind, the value between the quotation marks will be interpreted as a JavaScript expression. Since inStock was true, we're seeing the inStock p tag. Unsurprisingly, vif can be used alone by itself. There is another conditional directive called vshow. It's similar to vif, but vshow will still render the element but just hide it using display none. This means it's a more performant option, and it's a good choice for pieces of a template that you know will need to appear or disappear very frequently. Let's change this back to vif and bring back the out of stock element. We can also use velsif along with vif and velse. For demonstration, let's change in stock to inventory. And we'll change the conditional here using inventory. Now we can also add another element and use velsif. And since inventory is 8, it's almost sold out. That was just for demonstration. We're going to change this back to in stock with true and change the condition back to in stock, and also remove this velsif branch. Now that we've learned conditional rendering, let's move on to rendering a list of items. First, create a new ref with an array. We'll render the list of items in the template. We're going to use v4. For each detail item in details, we'll render the item. As long as your data is iterable, it will be compatible with v4. In our case, we're using the array value from a details ref. And the detail variable is created on each iteration to represent each item in the array. The list should show up like this. You can think of v4 as a conveyor belt. It takes each item from the array and renders them one by one. Next, let's create an array of objects and use v4 on it. We're going to render the variants in here, again using the v4 directive. The variant color will be green and blue. Make sure that they're showing up in the browser. And just like in React, we have to set a key on each element. That's because Vue.js relies on virtual DOM just like React does. v4 and vif can be used together on the same element, but there's a caveat. The order in which they appear on the same element doesn't matter. vif will always be processed first. The fact that vif is placed behind v4 doesn't change anything. If you want v4 to be processed first, you have to put them in different elements. Now that we're equipped with some templating basics, we're ready to move on to the next lesson, where we'll add some interactivity to your page using event handling.